My name is Dan Wilson again, and today I'm going to get into the mind, brain, ego, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same. One thing that starts this cascade of disidentifying with yourself, and it is coming into this world in separate form. Um, that separate form is you, but it's only in form. The energy that you are is connected with everything and everyone. And when I say everything and everyone, I mean everything and everyone alive. Some would say even that stuff that is not alive. I won't go that far. I will, however, tell you that most of the issues that we ever had come from our thoughts. It's also the most creative thing we have, which is our mind. It has been doing a wonderful job of protecting you up until now, and maybe not, because if you're having issues, um, those issues are because of some thought. So it's kind of there's a paradox in there where mind starts from alone. We don't want to be alone. If we don't want to be alone, what we have to do is change to be as the world around us. Most of the people that are around us, and I'd say that's 99% of the people around us, um, know there's something missing, but they haven't laid their finger on just what it is. And really, it's you. You are the one making the choices from what the mind feeds you. Um, and a lot of those choices are made from past experiences. But the main firing points are we don't want to be alone, so we try to create ourselves to be with other people. This means we have to be judgmental of ourselves in comparison to others. So judgment's another one that fits into it, okay? But there's also another major thing. Because we come into this world and we look around and we see that we're not the same as everybody else, we start to hide in fear. That's why we start judging ourselves and saying, okay, I may not be okay in comparison to everybody else. Fear is a vague term. Actually, afraid, anticipation, doubt, assumption. But fear is literally a criticizing of yourself because you're afraid you don't look or feel or act as good as anybody else, um, or the same as anybody else, or you don't want to stick out. You don't want to be put on the spot. Fear is also an anticipation of a certain outcome when you get somewhere, or you're going to go do something. You might meet somebody, you might botch the circumstance, whatever you're into, and become a spectacle. And there isn't one of those that isn't assumed. Not one. None of it's true. It's an assumption in your own judgment. It's also your self critic. The self critic is the one that says, oh, you don't look as good as so and so, or everybody else seems to know what they're doing more than I do. And the very fact that I'm doing these videos is stepping out of my fear because I feel as though what I'm sharing with you is more important than my fear. Just like, so that would be kind of humble, yet not. That's actually pretty strong. That's why the triangle that I made that had allowing, um, compassion, and humble. Because to be humble, you have to be really strong. To be humble in this society, you have to step through your fears of how you're going to be judged and do it anyway. Because you're not making the best of the one life you have if you stay with the assumptions and the self doubt and the Oh, hell. I can't do that because of how somebody might view me. Why do we give people that much power? What makes us allow them so much strength over us? They don't have it. We take it from ourselves. We take it from ourselves and our own assumptions. And we like to say, oh, well, so and so did it to me. Well, not so. Um, anyway, this is a one on fear. And realize that when you go to fear, you're judging yourself. You're judging yourself. You have a desired outcome. You're assuming, you're wanting to be okay, and you don't know how to be okay, and you're trying. And if you're trying, you're dying. You're not living. Anyway, leave yourself alone. And the self is the mind. The mind has done a lot to get you where you are now, and it's time to start using it instead of allowing it to use you. Life's too short. Take it from me. I'm 62 years old and I'm doing these videos because I discovered what I was doing to myself. When I look around, that's all I see is people doing the same stuff to themselves. And it's sad. This mainly starts with our family, our parents. We look to our parents to see what they like in the siblings in our families. And if you have no siblings, then there's nothing to compare it to. So there's another set of issues and circumstances that are involved there. But we look to see what gets them their approval, then we try to change so that we're approved of the same way, not realizing we were okay to start with. We changed ourselves. We made a lot of choices within ourselves to be okay and to survive childhood. Now, this isn't a bad thing, not at all. But because of these initial starting points, we've never truly lived life. So, the thing we're going to play with here, and you can argue all of this if you want, but I have found over the past few years that this is true. All our issues come from alone. We don't want to be alone, so we change. We change to be approved of by everybody around us. Our self-critic, the thing that says, oh no, you can't do that, somebody won't like what you're doing, or you can't dress like that, because if you dress like that, then it won't be approved of by everybody you walk around. Or you can't do your hair like that. You can't dress a certain way. You can't do certain things because you're going to be judged by somebody else. Well, I hate to tell you, but we're our own worst enemy when it comes to our judgments. And we show ourselves very little compassion. We'll forgive somebody else anything, more so than we will ourselves. Funny how that works. Anyway, this is still the tip of the iceberg. We're going to get a lot more into it because these three major points, actually four if you include alone, because that's where it starts, are what we keep reacting to. We keep allowing ourselves to react to these underlying thoughts. The fear of being discovered. Why? I don't know. It's like we're afraid to live because we think we're doing life wrong. And I don't believe that for a minute. Yet I did it for years. That's why I'm sharing this with you. Growing up wasn't the world's easiest childhood, and you can get my book, The Best Kept Secret Is You. But it's kind of vague. It doesn't give you all the details. It gives you a lot. But it's really looking into our thoughts. What makes us think the way we do? That's why I bring up meditation. Meditation is important because that helps you stop that freight train between your ears so that you can actually start to emerge. So fear, one. Wanting, and that has a desired outcome to it. I say wanting because most of the time we have an issue, we don't want to be someplace, or we want to be doing something else, or we just can't be where we are. So we have a desired outcome for what we're doing. when we're in a specific place. Like for me, it was driving nails on a roof when I wanted to be at a doctor's office finding out what was happening with somebody. Um, and that caused me to get frustrated and angry. Now, that's the cycle: confusion, frustration, anger. Um, and really, it's our circuitry between our ears on overload. And we blow up, and then we go, what made me do that? Well, you didn't do it. Your mind did. And that's because once it takes over, it's like you're along for the ride. Even if it's like a roller coaster. And we all know about that one. And if you think about that for a minute, you'll realize that most anything that stops you from doing anything is because of a thought. Fear. Fear of the unknown. I don't know how to do that, so I'll put it off. I won't do it. It goes on and on. Judgment's something we do to ourselves all the time, and that's compare yourself to everybody else around you. Who am I in comparison to such and such or so and so? And am I doing this right in comparison to somebody else? Or making this thing perfect. When you do something, it's perfect already, just the way it is. And if it's not, it's because you're criticizing yourself on it. All right? When you look around and you have to compare it to somebody else, you're judging yourself. And you're assuming outcomes. When you did whatever you do, what happens if you leave it alone? Why is it so hard for us to take compliments? It's because we judged ourselves when we were little kids. When we looked around us and we compared ourselves to other people, all we did was beat ourselves down, especially when we tried to be like everyone else around us. Try that sometime, because I know you have. Look around you. How many different characters do you see? How many different possible scenarios can you create for yourself so that you feel and look okay to everyone? Not possible. So, the self, which is your mind, has done this for you. Why? Because we're allowing beings. If we're allowing beings, we don't judge. In essence, we're love. Love doesn't judge. It is selfless. There's no self. That in itself tells you one thing. The self is your mind, the tool between your ears that is meant to help you create and invent and assume certain scenarios when you are inventing and creating. And as you do that, you're going to make mistakes. Just like life is full of what we call mistakes. You've never been a mistake. We've had a case of mistaken identity. We think we're our minds. Get the key there? Think. Those thoughts. And you'll find you wind up right back in it again the minute you judge, the minute you go to fear, the minute you have a desired outcome, or you want something to come out a certain way, you're right back in your mind, brain, ego. And the critic shows up. It's going to give you a hard time. And then it cascades into the others because you can't be in one of those. One of those is fear, judgment, or a desired outcome or a want. Okay? You can't be in one of those and not be in all three. You can't be in one of those and not be in all three. It just doesn't happen. Try it sometime. Then, find a way to leave that alone. Leave yourself alone. You can choose that one. It's called I won't judge. It's called I won't be in fear. It's called I hear you knocking and I hear you talking, but not right now. Maybe later. because it's the only thing that's going to stop you from living life is your own thoughts, regardless of who you say gave them to you, because nobody gave them to you. You accepted them. You chose to keep that inside you, and you can choose to let it go. Believe me, life gets a lot better when you quit listening to that little voice in your head. And I know, oh, you're listening to that voice and you're talking with that voice, you must be nuts. No. That voice is your mind. You've been communicating with it since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. And nobody's telling you that. It's like, you remember the one with the devil and the angel? And they're having this conversation? Well, what do you think that's going on? You don't have to listen to the devil. And the devil's not out there. It's in here because we haven't identified who we are yet. We haven't identified who we are yet. And we're not this. We're not the tool. We are literally the energy choosing from the tool's information. Try it sometime. Listen to some of the terms that are out there. Make up your mind. Anyway, this is fun. I use the term wanting because it has a paradox involved in itself. In other words, if you're wanting something, you don't want something else. So there's no allowing in there. Okay? You have a desired outcome. You want things to come out a certain way, or you don't want it to happen like that. And anytime this stuff is going on, you get frustrated. You get confused. Why didn't it work out the way I wanted? What is the problem here? How come I'm not getting what I wanted? Does this sound like a child to you? The reason I say that is because this is a child's program. This is all about me. Just like fear and my judgment is all about me. There's no love in it. Okay? And there's no love of you if you're allowing yourself to react to these thoughts. None. Yeah, we call it love. But then again, what is love? We know most of us would say love is selfless. And the mind is all about self. You at your core is not about self. It wants to live, period. It doesn't want to die. So if you're wanting to live, you're in the don't wants. Paradoxes. Okay? You have the same thing with fear. You have the same thing with your judgments. And they're all interlaced. Now, the flip side to that, we'll get into it in a later date. Love is love. It allows. Okay? Now, you can be in compassion. You can be in empathy. You can be humble and allowing. This doesn't mean you love somebody when you're that way to them. This means that you are loving, period. Not only them, but yourself. Because if you're in the other side, fear, want, and judgment, you're hurting. And as you're hurting somebody else. That's guaranteed. But on the love side, where you're allowing, you're compassionate, and you're humble. If you're like that with all different people, they start to want to cling to you. And that would be codependent. This isn't teaching codependence. This is teaching independence. Because most of us are totally codependent. And if you don't like that, they say the truth is tough. And like I told you when I started this thing, I'm not going to pull any punches. This is all going to be as real as I know it to be. And if you have any issues, please let me know. Dan Wilson, be well.